Hello, genealogy tubers, and welcome to a new Let's Play for BlueAnkylo. So this episode will be just an introduction, and we're not going to actually get to any gameplay today. We're just going to talk about the game and why I picked it, and then we're going to go over some of the specific mechanics for this game, assuming you're looking into this from a more modern Fire Emblem perspective, maybe the Game Boy Advance or more recent English Fire Emblems. So we're going to spend a little bit of time outside of the game. Next episode, if you want to skip to it, will be episode 1, where we read the introduction story and get to the actual gameplay. So, hey everybody that stuck around past the first 10 seconds. Welcome to the next game, Genealogy of the Holy War, also known as Fire Emblem 4. Never originally released in English, always Japanese with fan translations. We're going to play with the Project Naga, or Naga, however you like it. Pronunciations is going to be a great part of this Let's Play. Project Naga, fan translation. It's been out quite a few years now, but I've never played this game. So this is a semi-blind Let's Play in the sense that I've never done it. I've watched off and on a little bit of other people doing Let's Plays, although they tended to be more targeted, either like a ranked run or a low turn count or something. I haven't ever seen just a passive story mode playthrough like what I'm going to do. I'm sure they're out there. Anyway, so Genealogy of the Holy War, Fire Emblem 4, Super Nintendo. The reason I picked this is primarily because I've been playing a lot of Fire Emblem Three Houses, which came out recently in my time zone, my timeline, this current version of history. And I keep hearing people saying Three Houses is a lot like Genealogy, so hey, that's kind of cool. Also, I've been meaning to play it for ages, but hey, the translation's pretty good these days. Also, the sort of sequel, or however you want to look at it, Fire Emblem 5, also known as Thracia 776, only very recently got a full translation patch, like March 2019 or May, something like that, like only a couple months ago. So that's also piqued my interest. So now I've got two Super Nintendo era. Also, notice that Shozu Kaga. Everyone really loves this Kaga guy, the original game designer. I think he left somewhere in the Game Boy era age. So the way I understand it is this is a lot more old school Fire Emblem-y, less stuff like you'd see in Fates, let's just say. Although it does have the original pairing of couples and having children, but they don't have any weird magic mumble-jumbo time travel nonsense like Awakening and Fates did. I've heard the story is really good. Some of the more recent Fire Emblem games, again, this rag on Fates a little bit, had kind of ridiculous stories, like really hard or bad writing or whatever. Even like Fire Emblem 7 for the Game Boy Advance, not particularly amazing on the story. They're not all bad, but they've been kind of up and down, let's just say. Anyway, the idea is this one and Thracia are sort of at the upper echelon of good Fire Emblem stories, which is nice, because I do appreciate a good RPG story. And so that's cool. What else is there to say? So for this Let's Play, I'll probably say this again for episode 1, but I'm not going to be playing a strict Iron Man, no reload kind of thing, because it's going to be my first playthrough, and from what I hear, these games are fairly difficult, particularly Thracia, but even Genealogy has some. They're very large maps, and restarting a map is like a huge time investment. So the game has, this game specifically, and maybe only this game, actually has an autosave every turn. So if you mess up, you can just reload your turn, which kind of helps out. But I'll probably have some save states every now and then, and I'm not going to be doing like, oh, I missed, let's reload, or oh, I died, let's reload. But it's kind of more as I learn how the mechanics work and explain things. We'll test some stuff out, and we'll try to. I'm probably not going to get best ending or anything, but you know what I mean. Like I'm just going to say, it's not a pure no reload kind of run, but I'll definitely try to keep my YouTuber integrity together. So that's kind of the game. The next thing I want to spend a little bit of time on is talking about some of the big changes. If you're looking at this sort of from the perspective of either the Game Boy Advanced era Fire Emblems, like the Sacred Stones or Blazing or Binding Blades, maybe if you played the 3DS games or the GameCube, Radiant Dawn, Path of Radiance, one of those two, or the more recent, of course, Three Houses, there's some very big changes going back to Genealogy. So we're going to talk about that a little bit for today's episode. And to do that, I'm going to pull up the website that I would generally recommend for using, looking up Fire Emblem related information, SerenesForest or SerenesForest. There is a wikia, but start here. So I'm going to try to stay away from spoilers and stuff because the game, like I said, has an interesting story. So I'm not going to be looking into that kind of thing. But I am interested in some of the stats and characters and stuff. And let's just say right off the bat that some names, actually I should just look at the name chart here, are going to be different depending on what translation you're familiar with. This is kind of the idea. You know, you have your original Japanese name, and then the however you pronounce these words, the lettered version of Japanese, and then, you know, whatever fans, North American names. And you can definitely see there's some changes over time. I'll be trying to stick with whatever this current patch works with, which is generally going to be these ones over here. Although some of them might be spelled a little differently, I might pronounce them a little bit differently. So just bear with me if you have a favorite of how you like to read a certain name or spell, or I'll be using, you know, what I read or what I make up. So try not to get too caught up on stuff like that. There's lots of different versions of it, and I don't know if there's very often a canonical name, although sometimes I think like Sigurd is in other games, like the phone Fire Emblem game. So, you know, there's some of these that are sort of canonical by the company, but a lot of the times this is just what fans have decided is the correct translation of Shigurdo, you know, it's fine. Anyway, so that's just a little minor thing, no big deal there. Let's see, what do I want to, I don't want to spend too much time going through stuff. It has similar kind of growth rate stats, so that's cool, we're not going to worry about that. You know, every level up will give you random % chance of getting all your stats, getting individually each stat up. That's pretty standard for Fire Emblem. There's kind of this modifier based on bloodlines, which might sound familiar if you're playing Three Houses, although I don't think the Three Houses one give you stat modifiers, but characters technically have like a base growth rate, and then depending on their bloodline, they get modifiers. Although when you're looking at it on screen, I'll have it on the left side of the screen while we're playing. It just has the summed version of it, which is what you generally read about. So growth rate's pretty standard, independent, every level up. So some people will get RNG blessed or doomed, depending on their luck. There is Holy Blood mechanic, which, you know, we'll talk more about as we get into it later. There is a love system, even a jealousy system, which we may or may not find out about as we play. Some inheritance and pairing, which I'll start talking about later on. This is nothing important at the moment, but just like, you know, a good Awakening Let's Play, you'd want to match up your favorites and try to get the right children and all that kind of thing. What else is there to talk about? Oh, okay, so that's like your very, very basics. Let's talk about some of the weapons a little bit, just briefly. So weapons will have durabilities, just like most Fire Emblems, although there's a couple where they don't lose durability. And they have, the primary difference will be your required rank to equip, but if I understand correctly, unlike more modern Fire Emblem games, I think it started with Thracia actually, your weapon skill doesn't go up via use. Like in the modern Fire Emblems, every time you swing a sword, you get a little bit of sort of sword experience until you get to B or A, and then that way you get to use the better swords, like a silver sword, for instance. And I think some of them give you stat bonuses at certain ranks too. I think the Game Boy Advance ones gave you like a small crit bonus if you maxed out to S rank your weapon. I think it was something like that. Anyway, sometimes they give you a stat bonus. This one, I believe it doesn't. Weapon skill for characters is essentially just which weapons they can use, and that's fine. And it doesn't go up, so just live with it. One thing you might notice is there's kind of a standardization for like weight. So it's maybe not as balanced as some of the more modern games, where usually a steel sword will do more damage, might essentially more damage, but way more. So you lose a little bit of attack speed in exchange for some damage. But you can kind of see like the hit rates tend to be consistent along with the weight, which means essentially silver is always better than steel, which is always better than iron. There's really not a lot of balancing other than perhaps the cost. And you can repair weapons in this game, which is pretty cool. So anyway, I'm not going to go through all this stuff, but that's kind of like an important little note if you're used to the more modern ones. What else was I going to talk about? Let's see. I want to talk about skills. So skills is one of the big things that's different. And let's just start with a standard Fire Emblem thing that probably anyone that has not played these old games is probably used to. Follow-up attacks or doubles. It's not like a brave weapon that gives you like the extra ×2, but just regularly, if you're attacking an enemy, You attack them, they get their counterattack, and then you get a second follow-up attack. What triggers that? It's traditionally in most Fire Emblem games, your attack speed being more than 4 greater than the enemy's attack speed. Or if theirs is more than 4 greater than yours, you get doubled or followed up. That is not in this game. A random character does not get a follow-up attack. So you will get one attack no matter how fast you are, unless you have the Pursuit skill. And the Pursuit skill doesn't have an attack speed plus 4 greater than attack speed. It's just straight up higher. Now, there's also no constitution in this game, so in modern Fire Emblems, generally, there's sort of a mechanic where you've got your speed, you've got a equipped sort of encumbrance from your weapon that you're using, and generally some sort of build or constitution type mechanic that reduces that penalty from the weight, and that's what your actual attack speed is. In Three Houses, it's just it's like strength divided by 5. In a lot of the Game Boy Advance ones, it's just straight up constitution. Sometimes it's just strength. I think that's what the Path of Radiance did, is instead of having con, they do have a constitution, but I think attack speed was based on your strength modifying your weight. Anyway, point is, in this game, attack speed will be speed minus weight of weapon compared to enemy speed. The winner gets a double attack in the idea of attack, counterattack, follow-up attack. But only if you have the skill Pursuit, and not everyone will have Pursuit. So that's like a huge... I feel like this might be one of the biggest changes if you're used to modern ones. You get used to having high speed units are really good because they get double attacks. Well, now they might, but if they don't have Pursuit, high speed doesn't help you very much. You still get the evade and the hit rate and stuff, but you might not get a double attack. So that's a big one. In the same vein, the critical skill. So in modern Fire Emblems, again, counting most of the games not newer than, say, Fire Emblem 6 or so, maybe even 5. I'm not super familiar with Thracia. Thracia has its own gimmicks. But usually, you always have some amount of critical hit chance, and it's generally a comparison of your... it's generally skill into a formula versus the enemy's luck. Luck is like anti-crit, and your skill and sometimes like class abilities adds to your crit, or your weapon, like a killing edge or something, adds some critical chance. So in typical Fire Emblems, like, again, when I say typical, I just mean the modern ones, the ones you may have played in English. Any character can do crits with the right weapons or stats. But again, just like Pursuit, in this one, there's no automatic critical unless you have the critical skill. So I believe... I don't even think they exist, but let's just pretend there was a killing edge weapon. Like, you notice there's no crit stat here for the swords, but pretend there was. Unless it... Actually, wait a second. There is a killing weapon. Maybe not a sword. I think there's a killer bow. Is that... Yeah, that's the thing. So it doesn't have a... My idea here was, imagine in the modern game where you have a killer bow that has like a 30% crit rate. Well, that wouldn't do anything in this game unless it gives you the critical skill, and then you can crit. So anyway, the point is, generally you don't have to worry about enemies doing crits unless they have a specific weapon, which is cool because one of the big run killers in a lot of hard Fire Emblems is when an enemy gets that 1% crit activation and they one-shot your character and then you're dead. So, and with permadeath, you know, that sucks. You can usually find ways around it to play safe, but sometimes it just comes down to a little bit of luck, and you might just lose it. So anyway, critical skill has, you can see the exact stats here. The weapon kill bonuses, I forgot about that. This is a new mechanic. Weapons keep track of how many enemies they have slain. So that's the weapon kill bonus, is how many targets you've killed with it. So it's kind of incentivizes you to use the same weapons for a long time. I'm not sure exactly how the math works on that one. It might just be at certain thresholds it adds a modifier, but like, I don't know if it's plus 1% per kill kind of thing, but whatever. I'm sure that kind of detail doesn't matter too much. But anyway, skill plus that bonus as a percent. That's pretty cool. Theoretically, with high skill and a weapon that's killed a lot of enemies, that might be a relatively reliable strategy. Now, speaking of random numbers, I just want to mention this while we're at it. I don't know if it's in the guide anywhere here. If you're used to the modern Fire Emblems, there's kind of a... Again, this is a little bit complicated and mathy, but there's kind of a... Whenever there's a random chance, like a to-hit chance or a to-critical chance or to effect with statuses or something, but generally any to hit sort of calculations. The way the RNG works in modern games, again, this is super summarized and I'm not an expert, is essentially there's 2 random dice rolls. So let's say the game says you have a 90% chance to hit. It's not just one, I say dice roll just to imagine it. It's all done with math and computer programs. But inside there, the little the RNG gods are playing with D100s, and you'd think 90% means 9 times out of 10 you would hit, and that would be correct in this game that we're playing right now. But in modern games, Fire Emblem has kind of a more user-friendly approach to random numbers, and it essentially rolls 2 times for every random effect, like hit or crit. So if it says 90%, it actually has 2 chances to get 90%, which means your actual effective hit rate is much, much higher, because you only need one of those to apply, and as long as one applies, then you get the hit no matter what. So it's kind of... That's why if you play the Game Boy Advance ones or the more modern ones, generally if you see a high percent odds, like say 90% or higher, you will very, very rarely miss. It's more likely than 9 times out of 10. And if it says 99%, you can almost guarantee you'll be fine. There's still a very rare chance that you'll miss. But in this game, if it says 99%, there really is a 1 in 100 chance you'll miss. So it's a lot more common to see high percent odds straight up miss than in modern games. And I believe it works in the reverse for low percent. In the same idea is instead of needing... I forget exactly how the math works in the modern games, but by the same token, in the modern Fire Emblems, if you have a low percent, like 10%, I believe you need both random numbers to be below 10 or whatever, however you want to think about it, to activate. Whereas in this game, it's just a 1 in 10. In this game, it's just true. Whatever the percentage is, that's what you get, period. In the modern ones, it tends to be more player-friendly, so it skews it. 50-50 is still 50-50. But if it's below or above 50% odds, it's either actually better than that or actually worse than that. If an enemy has a 10% chance to hit you in, the Game Boy Advance ones, it's actually much lower, and you're almost certainly safe. In this game, not so much. Anyway, point is, rambling on a little bit, that makes a big difference in the strategy of the game, because you can't rely on a 10 or 20% hit rate to not die, and you can't guarantee that your 80 to 90% odds are pretty sure to hit, because they're only really 4 out of 5 to hit, kind of thing. And you're probably attacking more than 5 times, so you'll probably see a miss on your turn, kind of thing. If you think about it like that. Anyway, rambling, you know how it goes. There might be a couple more skills. The skills are kind of the big thing that I want to go over here before we go too much further. So Wrath is fairly simple, straightforward. Just remember these later when we get talking about it. If your HP is below half, you get a guaranteed crit. I don't think you need the crit skill for Wrath. It's sort of a separate thing. So that's neat. Probably fairly easy to set up. Big Shield is, I believe, called Pavise in the translation I'm using. And it's much, much, much better than the modern versions of Pavise or Aegis. Straight up, your character's level percent of taking 0 damage, which is pretty awesome. So that could be pretty useful or infuriating when an enemy has it. Continue, this is, I believe it's called Adept in our translation and in modern skills. So this is just a pretty decent percent chance. Attack speed plus 20 is relatively friendly to get an extra attack. Now, this is not the same as a pursuit extra. This is more like they say hero. Whenever they say hero, just think of the brave weapons if you're familiar with them. You get a × 2 effect. So usually you'd go attack, counter, and then maybe an extra attack. If you have adept, essentially, if you get the activation, you go attack, attack, counter. Or potentially with both of them, attack, attack, counter, and then if you get the pursuit and the adept, another 2 attacks. So you could get 4 attacks in a row. 4 attacks with a counter in between. So that's pretty sweet. Steal, no big deal. It's just gold in this game. You can't steal weapons, as far as I understand. So gold is going to be handled... While we're looking at steal, gold is handled much differently than usual, as well as your inventory. There's no communal gold pool or item pool like most Fire Emblems, I think. Each individual unit has their own stock of gold and their own inventory. So you can't just trade stuff between players. Your character needs the gold to buy the weapon that they get. And now, technically, there's a way of selling what they have to a pawnbroker and then having another character buy that. So you can sort of transfer items around, but it costs gold. And you only sell for half price, I believe. So you sort of lose out on gold to transfer items, which is a little bit weird, but, you know, it'll be interesting to work with. Awareness, I think this is called Nihil in the modern games, or Nihil, or however you want to say it. This is going to be anti-crit or effective bonus. So bonus damage to flyers, bonus damage to armor kind of thing. Armor slayer, bow slayer, or, bows and armor slayer type stuff. So, again, probably situational at best. Not a lot of enemies are going to have crits, so that's not going to help as often as in modern games. Having the crit immunity is very, very nice because everyone has a chance to crit, theoretically. Ambush, this is called Vantage nowadays, if I remember correctly. This just means if someone attacks you, but you're already below half health, you just attack first. They still get their attack, but you strike first. Which is very nice if you can finish them off, but if you can't finish them off, it doesn't really matter much. It's a way of trying to keep your almost dead units alive. It's an okay survival skill. Charge is also known as Accost, depending on what translation you're using. This one's a little bit more complicated. Essentially, it locks you into combat for some number of rounds, as if you're in like an arena, basically. And you basically, every round, you need your HP to be higher than 25, and then there's a formula % chance to kind of continue along, I believe. The idea is you want like a very tanky character with a lot of HP with a good attack speed, I guess. And then maybe you can't kill them in 1 or 2 hits, but you lock them into combat. So you attack, they attack, you attack, they attack until they're dead. So if you have a lot of defense and a lot of HP and you can only do a small amount of damage, you might eventually kill them in combat. Or it'll break when your HP goes down too far. I don't know how useful that'll be, but it's kind of a new skill. A dance, super good. You might notice right here, not just one unit, but all adjacent units. So that's like a quad dance. That's pretty powerful. Charisma, this is more like just a passive hit rate and avoid rate, which is nice. And it's like what you get from support bonuses in the future, basically. Prayer, I think this is called Miracle. And Miracle is different in like every game Miracle is in. So this is something that you might want to look at for a second. It's if your HP is dropped to 10 or less, you get extra avoid, and there's a little formula you can follow. Essentially, if an enemy damages you and you go down to like 1 HP, you will have 10 times 10, so 100 avoid for that turn. Now, it ends as soon as the next turn goes on, so you can't just rely on to stay alive forever. It might work really well in the arena. It might save one of your guys alive. Like, it has some uses, but you have to do some math. This is where the math gets important. If you've got I think this is typically on like healers and stuff. If you've got a healer that's got, let's just for argument's sake say they have 20 HP, and you do the math and you're sure that an enemy will not kill them in 1 hit, but will deal like 18 damage, let's just say. They'll bring them down to 2, that'll give them enough avoid to dodge the next attack. Then your healer is pretty safe as long as you can get them out of combat on your next turn. It should be fine for the enemy phase because this lasts the entire enemy phase. So even if there's 15 enemies all attacking, the first one does 18 damage, and then the rest, assumedly, all miss if you have, if you can drop their attack rate, their hit rate to 0. So it's cool. It's definitely neat, but it takes some, like I said, it takes some math and a little bit of preparation. It's just a regen, no big deal. I think this is going to be called Paragon in our game, and it's just double experience, which is pretty cool. Still a maximum of 100, 1 level up per battle max, but still doubling is cool. Bargain, I think this is like the card effect from future games. You just buy things at half price. That's cool. This is Astra, I believe is the modern name for it. 5 attacks, or 10 if you're using a brave weapon, which is ridiculous. Like, that's stupid, but cool. And unlike sort of the modern ones where it's 5 attacks at generally like 30% might or something like that, it's kind of like a reduction in damage. It's just full power. So skill percent, you can't rely on it, but a skill percent chance to get 5 times the damages or possibly 10 times damage, yeah, pretty good. Each of these attacks doesn't trigger other skills, so this kind of like replaces your attack, and then you don't get to combo it. But I think theoretically, if you have Pursuit, right, like your standard double, I believe the idea is you could attack, trigger Astra 5 hits, the enemy, if it's alive, somehow attacks you back, and on your second attack, your follow-up, you could theoretically trigger Astra again and get another 5 or another 10. But I can't see very much surviving that at that point, so pretty cool. I like that. Moonlight will be Luna, I believe, is sort of the translation. Luna is often a spell, a dark spell that just ignores enemy resistance. This one is probably better because it ignores everything. Defense, resistance, defense. I believe it even ignores Big Shield or Pavise as well. And I believe it's an auto hit, yeah. So this is pretty cool. Particularly good for those big tanky enemies with lots of armor or resistance. So that's cool. And then these are specifically sword skills. So swords kind of rule in this game, if you're wondering. All the superpowered abilities are sword skills. And then finally, for skills, the last one will be Sun Sword, which is Soul. And it just, you basically recover HP as you do. This is pretty standard. This has not changed much. I think in future Fire Emblems, it only restores half HP from what damage you deal. But, this is still pretty good. So, pretty cool stuff. And that's the big skills. Okay, I know I spent a lot of time there, but skills are, not explained in-game all that well, and it's pretty important. There's not too much more I want to cover. There's a weapon triangle, so this game has the sword beats axes, axe beats lance, lance beats swords, and I believe specifically you get 20 hit and avoid when you are winning the triangle, or minus 20 hit and avoid when you're losing the triangle. And there is also a fire beats wind beats thunder beats fire. It's one of those directions, I forget. So there's a weapon triangle for magic, and technically light and dark also have advantage on any elemental, I believe, if I remember correctly. It's not like Fates where you have to keep track of throwing knives and bows and all that mumbo jumbo, but they have separate triangles basically. So that's cool. In some games, the weapon triangles also give you like extra damage or something, or crit rate maybe. I think it's usually hit, avoid, and damage. In this one, there's no damage bonus. It's just hit and avoid. Some of the staffs are a little different. We'll get into these later on. I don't need to go into all this stuff, but the warp and rescue staffs are a little bit different than they are in the modern games. There is actually a revival staff if someone's dead, which is kind of crazy. So it's not exactly permadeath. There is a way to resurrect a couple people. So that's cool. And that might be all I really was going to talk about, I think, as far as... There's probably lots of little details I haven't gone over, and I will try to explain them as we go through it. But that's the big one. So hopefully that covers like most of the big changes for the game. There's a lot of minor differences between the old Fire Emblems and the new ones, obviously. So we'll talk more about Holy Blood. Leadership is a stat I haven't really talked about yet, but certain characters will have a leadership star rating, and that will give, I believe, still range 3, just like a support bonus. It'll give those characters some additional hit and avoid. I'll be showing that on the side screen there, along with the growth rates and the weapon skills, weapon ranks and weapon skills. Holy Blood, just a quick summary, is it sort of gives you a weapon skill up. Like if you have a Holy Blood that's associated with bows, it will give your bow ranking, even though your class might typically have like a B in bows, it'll upgrade it to A or star or something. Holy Bloods also affect your growth rates, so it's kind of weird because characters have growth rates and Holy Bloods are kind of unique per character for the most part. But major, minor Holy Bloods affect growths and weapon skills, and also unique legendary weapons, as you might expect in a Fire Emblem game. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I know I've kind of gone on for a while here, but anyway, I just figured I'd want to do a bit of introduction for anyone that's not super familiar. And we're back to the old school music. I love Super Nintendo era audio in general, and it's Fire Emblem, so what can go wrong? Alright, next time we will start the actual game. I will read through the opening scroll and story, and we will get to work. And we will meet our cast of brave heroes. Hopefully this gives you a bit of an idea of what the game will actually look like, because, I've been spending all this time looking at a screen of text, a wall of text. Yeah, Shozukaga, that's the one you want to send your round of applause to. Anyway, pretty cool. Look at that. Awesome critical there. Swordmasters, pretty hype. Pretty hype. Alright, folks. Thanks for hanging in there. I'll see you next time. Have a great day. Hope you enjoy the series. I'm getting pretty hyped, so it should be fun.